now?
Okay, I will.
Yeah.
I'll wait for you to allow me and then I'll share my screen.
Sure. Okay, now we are in Facebook now, and I'm happy to be here with you again in this special day because it's the backup and all the continuity of the chapters, the previous chapter that Alisa Waller or on our guest today, and she was sharing a previous chapter, so you can watch it also in the fusionmiwi.com. You can find all the links of the chapters, but you can just follow these ones and keep on the track so you can see all the topics that she was like talking about, farming, food, and everything about the relation that we have with the food and COVID and the future. So we are all part of this ecosystem. So Alisa is just explaining a lot of real projects that are working around the world, and that she were like sharing all this experience. So it's very a rich knowledge, and it's very great to have it here again. This lecture with her in the chapter 5, and then we have one more missing. So thank you so much for being here in the Sustainable Fair 2020 2020 on the online versions. Thank you so much, Elisa. I will close my micro so you can share your screen, and really thank you for being here and share all your knowledge. It's an honor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brittany. The honor is mine. I'm just so glad that you're bringing this community of people together to share about environmental and social equity. And you're right that a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today are solutions and momentum that is growing in the world. And so what I hope that viewers will get out of today's 1 hour talk, or just under an hour, about 50 minutes, I'm hoping that what people will get out of it is a sense of optimism and some direction for projects that they can get involved with that are already building momentum globally. And in fact, there's one in particular that is open right now that I will talk about, which is the 1 Trillion Trees platform of the World Economic Forum. And they have an open call for applications right now. So if anybody who is watching this has a project that is in any way involved with regenerative reforestation and tree planting and maybe even regenerative agriculture, then you can go online and find their call for proposals. And so that is one way that you can get involved. And I will suggest others today. So I will share my screen, and today I'm going to be talking about funding. This is number 5 of a 6-part series about interrelationships with food, the way that we grow food globally, the way that we eat, and how these relate to forestry and farming and a whole host of other issues. And so today we're going to be focusing on funding. Today I'd like to talk especially about the global shift toward a regenerative way of living. So I'm not sure what this word regenerative is in Spanish, but the paradigm of regeneration is about creating more than we take. So there is a shift that is unfolding right now, and it is gaining momentum away from an extraction-based paradigm that made slavery a global industry for hundreds of years and has felled or burned half of the world's forests and threatens to destroy the world's topsoil in 60 years and has accelerated climate change and the 6th mass extinction since the Industrial Revolution. So how are we moving away from this extractive model toward a model that integrates regeneration into everything that we do related to how we grow our food? We're at a tipping point culturally. Globally, individuals, communities, corporations, and governments are at a point of reckoning. And I'm sure a lot of people can feel this right now. we're collectively beginning a massive shift from extractive ways of living toward regenerative ways of living. Regenerative agriculture, regenerative forest restoration, regenerative land use, regenerative economics, and even regenerative ways of eating are part of a larger paradigm shift toward a new relationship of harmony between human beings and nature. I'll outline the evidence of the great turning that's underway in the trillions of dollars being currently reallocated from old extractive systems to new regenerative systems. A sea change is underway. And what we see is that this is building momentum. And just to name three big ones, I'll start with the Food and Land Use Coalition, which has created a global blueprint for transitioning agricultural and land use practices from extractive systems to regenerative systems by 2030. And they've created a phased model from now until 2030, the next 10 years, and also until 2050. The second one I'll talk about is the World Economic Forum, which I mentioned earlier, which has launched just 5 months ago. They launched the 1 Trillion Trees platform with a global goal of growing, restoring, and conserving 1 trillion trees worldwide by 2030. I'll talk more about that as well. What you see pictured here is the World Economic Forum press conference announcing this platform. And this is one that I'll show you how you can apply also if you have some ideas for how you would like to contribute. And the third one that I'll talk about is soil regeneration, which is the linchpin of regenerative farming and forest regeneration. The Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations has estimated we're losing topsoil faster than we're regenerating it, and we'll lose it in 60 years. The United States, for example, is losing topsoil 10 times faster than we're creating it. The FAO, which is the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, I'll be referring to the FAO more during this talk. The FAO has launched the Decade of Family Farming in 2019, which outlines how family farms, which grow 80% of the world's food, can address this issue by adopting regenerative farming practices and empowering women and Indigenous people to lead the way. There is a deep relationship between regenerative farming, forest conservation, and forest restoration. In approximately the same period of time that I've mentioned, this next 10 years, it's going to be crucial for the Decade of Family Farming and the 1 Trillion Trees platform. You can also, in that 10 years, grow a 100-year forest in 10 years, thanks to a Japanese arborist named Akira Miyawaki, who spent the last 50 years creating a methodology for growing forests from the soil up. And this is a new methodology that he pioneered. We did not have this in our skill set as human beings before his discoveries. And so this is another intersection that I'm going to talk about related to soil, forestry, and regenerative farming. Back to soil. Healthy soil is the foundation of our agricultural and silviculture, that's forestry, silviculture practices. Soil sequesters 3 times more of carbon dioxide than the forests themselves. And the forests are required to help build up and replenish the soil. So there is a really integral relationship between the soil and the forests, and the soil, obviously, and the farming. As you know, soil erosion is caused by conventional farming, and deforestation is occurring so rapidly that the United Nations FAO, which I've mentioned, has estimated we could lose all of the world's topsoil in the next 60 years if we continue farming in the way that we have done so. And we do not need to continue farming in the way that we have been doing. Also, this will put extra pressure. The need to transform our farming practices is going to be under extra pressure because global population is growing rapidly. And it's estimated that we'll reach 9 to 10 billion people by 2050. And in order to grow enough food to supply all of these people, we're going to need to adopt better ways of farming. So today I'll talk about some of the major initiatives that are addressing these issues. We know what to do to prevent this or worse from happening. We just need to do it. So I'm going to refer back to the first 4 talks that happened over the last month and a half for those who have not seen them. The first talk was about food generally and how our relationship with food and what we choose to eat interrelates with deforestation and the risk of unleashing zoonotic disease transmission between wild viruses that are in closed loops in ecosystems. When you deforest, you can open up systems that now can spill over in what are called spillover events into human populations. This is very well documented and known. I also talked about the relationship with factory farming and spillover events from factory farmed animals to humans, which have actually led to 5 of the past near pandemics, including H1N1 and swine flu, and older bacteria as well, not just viruses, but also bacteria such as tuberculosis can have spillover events to humans. So the second talk, we talk more in depth about farming, regenerative agriculture, conventional farming, and the differences, and why regenerative farming is so exciting. The third talk, we spoke about forestry and the relationship between forestry and farming. And then we talked about fuel, because underlying all of these issues and related to them is climate change. And the largest cause of fossil fuel emissions is the burning of fossil fuels. And so I talked about the relationship between fuel, including biofuel and crops. So it comes back to farming and what choices we are making and what we are choosing to grow. And so today we'll be talking about funding as it relates to some of those things. We also, last time, in the last 4 talks, we left off with what I call an open-eyed pragmatic hope. And what I mean by pragmatic is that it works on the ground. What are the solutions that can actually work empirically in the real world? And by open-eyed, I mean sober. I mean that we're not just pretending or wishing that we could do certain things, but we're really looking at what are the actual barriers to implementing change that we want to make. And then where the hope comes in is we see people all over the world doing this already in large numbers, and including, I'll give one example, Vandana Shiva's Navdanya movement, which is a movement of regenerative agriculture in India. They have trained over 9 million farmers to convert to regenerative agricultural practices. And I'll come back more to that later. So from the first talks, we looked at the connection between human beings and the way that we interact with ecosystems, and how we are causing so much change globally more than ever. And again, the relationship between our deforestation and habitat destruction, as well as our agribusiness practices that increase the risk of potential future pandemic. We also looked at the relationship between food security and pandemic. Already, 1 billion people are going hungry a year. This is way too many people. And with COVID-19, we've seen projections that 300 million or more people may go hungry, especially in Africa. And we looked at the relationship between food security and climate change, and then also climate change and the increased risk of disease. So there's relationships all around. We also talked about these spillover events, world hunger, and what we can do to prevent hunger in the future. We also talked about some of the causes of deforestation, including beef as a major cause of deforestation in the Amazon, and food waste as a cause of inefficient practices. We're farming more than we're actually eating, and the relationships between hunger and waste. I made some suggestions for how to curb waste. And some of the nuances, for example, world hunger is not just a production problem, it's also a distribution problem. So we need to address issues of equity. And then we talked about topsoil loss, which I'll talk about more, and the United States and global differences. And it's really important that to understand that half of the world's habitable land is used for agriculture. Half of the land that we can occupy as human beings is used for agriculture. At the same time, we've lost half of our forests, and nearly 60% of this has been for beef. So I mentioned the Navdanya movement because this is an example of an entire nation of people mobilizing to turn around these negative and destructive systems and create something new. And India is a wonderful place for this movement to be possible because there is a very high volunteerism culture in many regions of India. And so there are a lot of people helping each other, educating each other, and helping each other to make this happen. And this is something that we can really learn from in other countries around the world. Also, we had also talked about, I mentioned that they've trained 9 million farmers. They also have seed banks, which is very important. We're going to talk about biodiversity. Biodiversity is a linchpin of resilience. And one of the things that we're facing as we lose biodiversity with conventional farming is we're losing our resilience. So you get more crop failures. And so what General Mills, which is a company that grows crops all around the world, is doing is they have transitioned 75,000 acres of conventional farms in the United States into regenerative agriculture. And they have a goal of transitioning 1 million acres by 2030. There are 6 principles of regenerative farming, which we went over in the last talks as well, and we'll look at these a little bit today as well. And I mentioned that we're currently in the United Nations Decade of Family Farming, which is part of the solution. And then what I also mentioned in the previous talks is that the FAO of the United Nations created a 7-pillar blueprint for family farming that actually dovetails with the sustainable development goals. And I talked about some examples like Pun Pun in Thailand, who is creating biodiversity through farming. In the forestry talk, we talked about some of the causes of deforestation and how these relate, how these compare regionally and amount to a global change in a loss of half of our trees. It's estimated 6 trillion trees before humans started cutting them. And it's estimated we have approximately 3 trillion trees now. And agriculture is the largest cause of this. Soy is the second largest cause because it is a feed crop for animal agriculture. And palm is another very large contributor to deforestation. The main 4 commodities that are responsible for tropical deforestation worldwide are beef, soy, palm oil, and wood products. And I'm going to talk about today a way that we can actually transform much of that. As you can see, 96% of forest fires are human caused because we deliberately light them so that we can slash and burn forests in order to clear cut the land and make room for agriculture. And that is a practice that has to stop. I also suggested ways that you as an individual can help change this. You can avoid palm oil, you can choose a plant-forward diet, you can avoid soy, and you can eat more variety. You can also go to World Wildlife Fund's Off Our Plates website to learn more approaches that you can use to contribute. We talked about land regeneration as well as regenerative farming and the 6 core principles. Here they are. And we talked about regenerative afforestation. So I've gone in depth into some of the results and methodologies for these approaches. Today, I'm going to talk more broadly in terms of funding these approaches. So I won't explain what each of these are today because I've done that in previous talks, and you can check them out on the links that Brittany has provided. But what I will do is talk about funding. The last thing that we talked about in the series before today was fuel. We talked about how fuel is the largest source of global warming pollution. And we talked about how energy subsidies vastly outweigh are vastly outweighed for fossil fuels than for renewables. And that is something that is rapidly turning around. We're seeing that the renewables sector is growing faster than anyone predicted. Wind is, which has the potential to supply the world's electricity 40 times over, is growing faster than predicted. And solar is also growing 121 times faster than 2010 predictions. So the investments in renewables are growing as the world starts to divest from fossil fuels. And this is a trend that we're going to continue to see as we, as some of these initiatives unfold. So today we're going to talk about funding, and this describes how we divert funds globally and regionally to support the practices that promote balance with nature, thus the long-term thriving of human beings, because we cannot survive without nature. Funding solutions look very different for very different regions. Thus, I'll be referring a lot to the brilliant work of the Food and Land Use Coalition, who created a global blueprint for transitioning to regenerative agriculture, because they do a really good job at creating a global plan that also responds to regional differences and the unique economic qualities and cultural qualities of each region. There's no one size fits all, but there are some principles that we can fall back on. So the Food and Land Use Coalition's global blueprint is to, it has, I'm just going to go to this slide here. Okay, so the report shows how this transition can create $5.7 trillion by 2030 and $10.5 trillion by 2050 by avoiding the costs of climate change and investing $300 to $350 billion, which is an order of magnitude less than the profits, which is required in global spending, they've estimated, each year for the transformation of food and land use systems to a regenerative model by 2030. This transition will create $4.5 trillion in annual opportunity for businesses associated with 10 critical areas of transition, which I will show you. They've created a hierarchy of priorities here. And so what we see is that these critical areas of transition are gender and demographic equity, improved rural livelihoods, digital innovation, which I'll explain what that is, local food economies, food waste reduction, which I've talked about in the introduction, diversifying protein sources, a healthy productive ocean, protecting and restoring nature, productive and regenerative agriculture, and healthy diets. And I'll give you a hint, those healthy diets are plant forward. You heard it here. It is now being officially recommended that globally people adopt plant forward diets. The second thing I'm going to talk about is that this will dovetail with the World Economic Forum 1 Trillion Trees platform, which was launched 5 months ago, which will fund the growth, restoration, and conservation of 1 trillion trees worldwide by 2030. As I've said, of the 6 trillion trees that once graced the earth, only 3 trillion remain. And this project will aim to restore 1/3 of what's been lost. This includes initiatives that halt deforestation and turn forestry into an agricultural model, rather than to fell or burn virgin forests. 2 other streams of initiatives are crucial to success here: protecting indigenous lands, empowering indigenous conservationists and forest keepers, and changing how we grow food and what we choose to eat. If we reduce meat consumption just by 50% globally, we could have an extra 20 million square kilometers of agricultural land, which could be used for regenerative agriculture to feed the growing population, as well as to grow lumber. No virgin forests will need to be felled or burned if we adopt this model. Globally, the #1 cause of deforestation is for agriculture, and in regions like South America, the top agricultural cause of deforestation is slash and burn for beef, i.e. cattle grazing. The next largest causes of deforestation are for animal culture, as I've said, are corn, soy, and fuel or food crops like palm, and again, corn for ethanol. We can preserve existing forests with plant forward diets based on crop diversity, as we use existing cropland more efficiently through regenerative farming practices, culture change, and food choices. We can reclaim more land for forest restoration and ultimately the restoration of biodiversity and healthy ecosystems. Now, I want to talk about the soil again. Soil regeneration and has a deep relationship with forest restoration and regenerative agriculture, as I've said. And it's interesting to know that healthy soil has 6 billion or more beneficial microorganisms in just 1 teaspoon of soil. And the way that we've been farming kills this soil. Extractive farming kills these organisms over time by tilling and exposing the soil. Loss of bacteria causes the loss of crucial nutrients because they create the nutrients, like nitrogen, which then has to be replaced by chemical fertilizers, which these chemical fertilizers have forms of nitrogen which are again lost from the soil through exposure, but these compounds put nitrous oxide into the atmosphere, which is 300 times more potent a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. Healthy soil, on the other hand, with healthy bacteria, creates its own nitrogen, which doesn't become nitrous oxide, and nitrogen fixes the nitrogen into plants and the entire ecosystem within the soil, and doesn't need chemical fertilizers. Healthy soil also has complex networks of fungal mycelium that serve as a massive underground nutrient transport system, crucial to agricultural crops and forests alike. Healthy soil also has loft. It has structure from decomposing green matter that allows the soil to breathe and allows it to absorb and hold water. And healthy soil is soft, allowing roots to penetrate deeply. It breathes and is teeming with beneficial insects like earthworms that help create tunnels for water to penetrate deeper. The no compost, no fungus, extractive model uses up but never regenerates the textured environment that microbes, insects, and plants require to thrive. Neither extractive farming nor conventional silviculture, which is forestry, practices intentionally build soil. Neither of them intentionally build soil with these elements as a foundation. as conventional farming kills the soil, it loses its ability to breathe, and it loses its ability to hold water. Rainstorms turn into washout events, with tons of soil washing into rivers and eventually to the ocean. And this is one of the leading causes of our loss of topsoil globally. Here's the silver lining. For most of the 10,000 years of human beings farming, we have not really understood the importance of soil. It's only in the last 50 to 20 years that we've really come to understand the importance of soil and what it actually needs to thrive. And now that we understand this, we can apply what we know. Using regenerative agriculture practices, we can actually grow more food on less land. Regenerative agriculture, as I said, is gaining momentum thanks to initiatives all over the world, such as Vandana Shiva's Navdanya network, which has trained 9 million farmers, as I said, in India to transition to regenerative farming. And I also mentioned that General Mills has a goal of transitioning American farms, 1 million acres, to regenerative agriculture by 2030. And as part of their approach, they have created a guild to train and mentor new regenerative farmers, especially they're focusing on young farmers, women farmers, and people of color. Al Gore also is creating a movement of regenerative farmers as part of a think tank that he began with 450 farmers in 2019. So you can see a lot of things that have been starting last year and are unfolding this year. I cannot emphasize enough how powerful the combination of regenerative forestry and regenerative agriculture are together for sequestering atmospheric CO2 and other greenhouse gases worse than CO2, such as nitrous oxide and methane, and restoring biodiversity. These regenerative practices, as defined by the Sustainable Development Goals and 6 pillars of regenerative agriculture, such as pillars 3 and 4, which is to maximize crop diversity and to keep the soil covered, address multiple issues at once, including climate change, the 6th mass extinction, biodiversity loss that leads to heightened susceptibility to disease, crop failure, global hunger, even pandemic. The solutions are simple, we just need to apply them. And we are beginning with much momentum now. So I'm going to talk a little bit more now about the global consultation report of the Food and Land Use Coalition. The blueprint here is to transform the world's food using the 2015 Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. And this initiative was launched in 2017, so it's been gaining momentum for 3 years. The premise outlined in the report is that the world faces a remarkable opportunity to transform food and land use systems over the next 10 years. The report lays out the scientific evidence and economic case that demonstrate that by 2030, food and land use systems can help bring climate change under control, safeguard biological diversity, ensure healthier diets for all, drastically improve food security, and create more inclusive rural economies. And they can do that while reaping a societal return that is more than 15 times the related investment cost. Delivering such a transformation will be challenging, and we'll talk about some of those barriers in a few minutes. However, it is possible. Leaving these systems to continue on current trends, by contrast, means what the report refers to as sleepwalking into a scenario wherein climate change, sea level rise, and extreme weather events increasingly threaten human life, biodiversity, and natural resources are depleted. The transformation of food and land use systems thus needs to become an urgent priority globally. The report breaks down their blueprint into several main areas. One is making the strategic case for rapid change, which I think I've done here. Another one is supporting countries with their food and land use planning, policy, and market redesign. And that is where the plan really hits the road. Another is empowering diverse change leaders across public, private, and civil society sectors. And second, last, developing evidence-based transformation pathways. That means research and development. And lastly, accelerating shifts throughout the private sector. And it includes recommendations for management of the intersection between forests, farms, and oceans. So back to the pyramid. Conceiving of the program as a pyramid, the transition of the apex, that's the top where it says healthy diets, is toward diets that are conducive to good human and planetary health. And this is because the consumption patterns of more than 9 billion people, which is where we're headed by 2050, what they choose to eat and how they make or are influenced to make those choices are the critical factors shaping how food and land use systems actually evolve. Empowering consumers to make better informed decisions that are healthier for them and for the planet ignites the whole reform agenda. At the second level, you see the power of nature-based solutions is mobilized to create more productive regenerative techniques of food production. So this is the green layer. This is all about being more productive. And then the layer below that is about changing our habits collectively at home, such as reducing food, diversifying protein supply. You can see in the photo that insects are actually included as a healthy protein supply. And I'll go into that a little bit more. But when I was living in Thailand, we were eating lots of insects as part of the diet. And it is not unconventional to eat insects. In fact, actually, a venture capitalist I went to see speak in the Bay Area near San Francisco was encouraging everyone to invest in insect-based protein bars, which hit the market in the United States a few years ago. So you can see also that gender and demography is on the bottom right-hand corner, and that is about equity. Women can be enormously powerful in shaping food and land use systems thanks to their central role in agriculture and in decisions concerning nutrition, health, and family planning. Making sure women have equal access to resources such as land, labor, water, credit, and like microloans is central to policies concerning the 10 critical transitions, including by accelerating the demographic transition. And you will probably recall that Project Drawdown listed empowering women, all of the different approaches to women leadership when combined were tied for #1 in the most effective solution to climate change. Stronger rural livelihoods, you see there also underlying all 10 critical transitions is a vision of rural areas transformed into places of hope and opportunity, which we have not seen in a long time, since the 1950s almost, in many parts of the world, where thriving communities can adapt to new challenges, protect and regenerate natural capital, and invest in a better future, ensuring a just transition where everyone's included. And here, next to that is the digital revolution. I'll explain that a little bit. I want to give one example. A company that creates biochar is growing as part of their power plant, where they create biochar that is emissions-free and locks carbon into the char. The process heats lagoons that are growing algae, and they are actually using digitization, or they're using an algorithm that actually uses AI to actually listen to the algae and what needs it has for temperature and pH and all sorts of other metrics. And so they're making the growth of this more efficient. And the algae is sequestering carbon dioxide from the atmosphere as it grows. And then it's added to the biochar to create a really nutrient-dense soil product that turbocharges soil and is a great soil regeneration methodology. So that's one example of digitization. This is also related to innovation And so there is a place for technology and innovation in this model. So here you see the platform basis of the digital revolution, the stronger rural livelihoods, and gender demography. And then you see resting on that are changes that we need to make to our lifestyles, like creating local farming, urban agriculture, reducing waste at home and systemically, and diversifying the protein supply. And then we see these nature-based solutions, which you can see that healthy, productive oceans are being included in this, as well as, of course, protecting and restoring nature and productive and regenerative agriculture. And at the top of the pyramid, which the report actually describes as the #1 most important solution in this entire process, is that we adopt plant-forward diets. And I have heard several interviews with the people who created this initiative. A lot of research has gone into this process. And there is scientific consensus that we need globally to adopt plant-forward diets. That doesn't mean that we all need to go vegan, but we need to cut meat consumption at least by 50% globally. So this healthy diets metric, they have mapped to how much money can actually be created or saved from climate change, or mitigated, how much of the investment there is, and how much money can be made. So you'll see that $1.2 trillion will be saved from being lost to climate change just by this Healthy Diets initiative. There needs to be an investment globally of $30 billion, and there will be a $2 trillion return. Whoops, let me click through and get back to that page. So that's healthy diets. Productive and regenerative agriculture has potential, if implemented globally, to prevent the loss of $1.17 trillion to climate change. With a $35 to $40 billion investment, we get a $530 billion return. Protecting and restoring nature, we see that we can prevent $895 billion from being lost to climate change. And if we invest $45 to $65 billion, we get a $200 billion return. Healthy and productive oceans, we can prevent $350 billion from being lost. And with investing $10 billion, we get a $345 billion return. So you can see that these trends are across the board. With diversifying protein supply, this creates $240 billion of return and prevents the loss of the same amount. And same with reducing food waste, with harnessing the digital revolution, with stronger rural livelihoods, with gender and demographies. That's really about equity. So here is a graph that articulates the hidden costs of not transforming to the system. And what we see here is that the need for urgent change is not always obvious when we look at the existing system that we're living in. On the surface, food and land use systems have been doing well in recent decades. Despite a growing global population, more and more people enjoy affordable, safe, and plantable food. But dig deeper, and the end-to-end system losses are well over 50% as a result of poorly allocated land and water resources, slow diffusion of best farming practice beyond large farms, underinvestment in rural infrastructure and human capital, and food loss and waste amounting to 1/3 of primary production. Food and land use systems also generate hidden environmental health and poverty costs estimated at $12 trillion a year globally, a number larger than the value of the system's world output measured at market prices. Environmental costs also Current food and land use systems cause up to 30% of total greenhouse gas emissions driving climate change and are the leading cause of the continuing conversion of the world's tropical forests, grasslands, wetlands, and other remaining natural habitats like peat bogs, and thus the main culprit of the ongoing sixth mass extinction of biodiversity. And there's also health costs. In addition to the direct impact of agricultural pollution on public health, food systems generate widespread malnutrition. More than 820 million people, most of them in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, still regularly go hungry, and this needs to stop, and it can actually stop. At the same time, some 680 million adults are obese, and there's the contradiction. On current trends, half of the world's population will suffer from malnutrition and related health effects by 2030, placing a heavy financial burden on health services. And then this graph also outlines socioeconomic costs, and these perpetuate poverty and inequality. 2/3 of the 740 million people living in extreme poverty are agricultural workers and their dependents, and we can turn this around. The economic and social benefits offered in this program in total are an economic prize of $5.7 trillion with an investment to $350 billion and a business opportunity of $4.5 trillion annually. What this strategy to achieve this actually looks like is a 5-prong approach of engaging government, business and farmers, investors and financial institutions, participants in multilateral processes and multi-stakeholder partnerships, and civil society. And what I've even started to see in North America is a transformation to a stakeholder capitalist model where corporations are starting to operate more with a stakeholder model. First of all, government, ideally working with key stakeholders, would develop national food and land use pathways rooted in science and consistent with the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement targets. Business and farmers as well, business leaders would get behind the transformation, voice strong public support for government reform agendas, and work with government and civil society to accelerate the transitions. Also, investors and financial institutions would demonstrate how with public counterparts, they could by 2023 drive up to $100 billion a year into the relevant asset classes and instruments needed to transform food and land use systems globally. The UN Secretary General, leaders in UN agencies, presidents and shareholders of multilateral development banks, and the International Monetary Fund would align their institutions' investment, advisory, and normative activities on food and land use systems to support and inspire governments' reform agendas, adapting organizational strategies, and mobilizing resources to reflect the scale and urgency of the challenge. And finally, civil society would shape social change movements, support the government and private sector, and hold all parties to account, hold everyone accountable. The philanthropic community could have an outsized impact if it tripled its funding for food and land use and directed it to the 10 critical transitions that we've just explored. These initiatives could deliver better environment, better health, inclusive development, food security. And several of these results are made possible by the freeing of more than 1.5 billion hectares of land that would otherwise be used for farming and livestock grazing in 2050. So what you see on this slide here is the better futures scenario. The gray, you see urban and non-arable land. The green just above that is restored natural ecosystems, not forest. And above that, afforestation, so that's the restoration of forests. And then standing forest is the top green one, followed by natural ecosystems and pasture land and cropland. What needs to happen to drive the change with speed and scale? there are many barriers that we face that we can overcome. Implementing these transitions will not be easy. Each faces barriers, whether related to policy, regulation, finance, innovation, or behavior. The current system is fragmented with vested interests defending their turf. However, practical examples of all 10 critical transitions are already up and running across the world, driven by policy, business, farming, community, and social entrepreneurs. And these entrepreneurs are creating waves of change, many arising from local communities. What they have begun has the same potential to surge as the renewable energy movement with disruptive technologies. That means technologies that are making a difference rapidly, from precision farming to agrogenomics, which is digital traceability systems and large-scale platforms for alternative protein and algae production, ushering forth agricultural revolution. There is a place for innovation to overcome many of these barriers. And what I want to invite here is an envisioning of what could be possible and how you could get involved. In the previous talks, we began each presentation with a future self meditation, and I'll invite a very quick 2-minute future self meditation here. So let's take a couple breaths. This is a time to integrate everything that we have just looked at and to sink back into the heart, aware of the breath, aware of your beautiful heartbeat. Imagine that you travel 10 years into the future, where 1 trillion trees have been planted and the remaining trees have been conserved, where the global agribusiness, extractive, conventional farming has transformed into regenerative farming, and where everyone is included in that transition in equitable ways. You see your future self participating in the transition and celebrating how far humanity has come. Your future self welcomes you. And you say to your future self, I don't yet know how we're going to do this. We have a map, we have a blueprint, but I don't know how I will contribute. And your future self says, it is okay that you do not today know how you will contribute, or you know some way that you will contribute, but you don't know the entire path that you will take. But that does not mean that you cannot do it. It is one step at a time. And today is the day to take that first step. So what is that first step that you will take today? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Allie. Really, thank you. Thank you for bringing everything to the table. I think it's just amazing that it's all interconnected. And also, like in previous talk, we were talking about gender and how important it is in our culture to make this change possible. And also what you just mentioned, that how it's we have the backup of all these movements that the women are doing and have so well, it's a very connective way and very, yeah, like it's very general, the approach that brings. And also we were talking about that, and also about the soil in previous talk, like how it's good to how to know that how is the texture that the soil must have, so it can have like all these benefits that you mentioned. So it's all like all this connected, and that we are here because we are part of this revolution that you're mentioning, the agricultural revolution that will bring the just the health to the world. So I'm really appreciate that your time and that you make all this for the sustainable fair and for the Verdeton, and I really appreciate it. And also like all what you mentioned, I just think that is just perfect for this moment about resilience. We have a talk about resilience so a couple of days ago, and was also a climate leader, and so it's just connected everything. And also I really appreciate that you take the time to make all this investment explanation, because we all know that if we follow a better path for the world and for the health of the life on the earth, everything will be much better, and we will save a lot of money on health. Just talking about health only, but if we like have all this point of view that you just bring to the table, I think it's more powerful as a civil society to make a change, no, and just to take little steps just by choosing what we're gonna eat. So I really appreciate that you bring all this connected and this explanation that was so nice. Thank you so much, really, Alisa, and for your time. And thank you all for joining us. And I really appreciate your time. And also thank you for being here and for sharing this. We will have the last chapter, and it will be. I'm very excited. Oh, here it is. So here are the talks that you can find on fusionmigui.com. You can find all the links to be aware of all that Alisa just mentioned and every one of it. And it's very rich, so we can change the habits that we are taking, so we don't have to be punished on our home for this end, right? And so thank you so much, Alisa, and be aware for the next chapter tomorrow of friendship, food, and our future after COVID. So thank you, Alisa.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank
Be
you,
well.
Alisa.
I'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.